Thomas Tallis, known in the 19th century as the father of English church music, is, alongside his student and colleague William Byrd, probably Renaissance England's greatest composer. Born in the first decade of the 16th century in Kent, Tallis was unique among composers of his generation in that his long career in church music spanned the English Reformation and the reigns of 4 Tudor monarchs: Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary Tudor, and Elizabeth I, with Tallis working in close proximity to all of them as part of the royal household. We don't really know anything about Tallis's childhood or his early musical training, and he first appears in the accounts of the Benedictine priory in Dover for 1530 to 31, where a Thomas Tallis, listed under the slightly derogatory job title of Joculator Organorum, joculato meaning jester or minstrel, was noted to have received an annual salary of £2. Tallis's life and music were unquestionably shaped by the unprecedented religious and political shifts brought about by Henry VIII and his children through the English Reformation. The first instance of this is the dissolution of the monasteries following Henry VIII's split from Rome and the passing of the Act of Supremacy. As a direct result, Dover Priory was dissolved in 1535, so Tallis found work at the Church of St Mary at Hill in London, and later at Waltham Abbey in Essex. Waltham Abbey would also be dissolved in 1540, the last monastic institution in England to go, which led Tallis to a job at the newly refounded Canterbury Cathedral. Tallis stayed in Canterbury until at least 1543, when it's likely that he began his tenure as a full-time member of the Chapel Royal, a court position he retained until his death in 1585. He served at various times as both a singer and organist of the chapel, as well as probably sharing responsibility for the training of the boy choristers, which is where he would have met and mentored the young William Byrd. Unlike Byrd, much of whose music was printed during his lifetime, Tallis published very little, and only in the final decade of his life. This makes any chronology of his surviving music extremely difficult, particularly for Tallis's early works, which are often found in manuscripts copied years, if not decades, after they were originally composed. What is clear is that Tallis was supremely pragmatic, evolving and adapting his compositional style to suit the needs and requirements of the moment and the musical forces available to him, be that lavish, virtuosic pre-Reformation polyphony, simple English texted anthems, or a new style of modern Latin texted motet for Elizabeth I. Tallis also revised his own compositions to fit new performance circumstances, adding sacred texts to instrumental works, as in the case of O Sacrum Convivium and his second version of Salvator Mundi, and also reworking earlier pieces with new English or Latin words, depending on the context. It's easy to think of England at this period as very insular, but Tallis was also influenced by his continental contemporaries, whose music he would have known and had access to through the court. Gaude Gloriosa, as well as being one of Tallis's most impressive compositions, is also one of the most remarkable in terms of its genesis. Seemingly written for Mary Tudor, it shares a formal design with William Mundy's Vox Patris Celestis, which is thought to have been written in celebration of Mary's accession to the throne in 1553. Tallis's chosen text, a hymn praising the Virgin Mary and extolling her virtues, is an obvious mark of deference to the new Queen, and compositions of this kind, which draw connections between Mary and her biblical namesake, were politically useful in serving to reinforce the legitimacy of her position. However, a fragment of music found stuffed in a wall during building works at Corpus Christi College in Oxford back in 1978 reveals a very different origin and intended purpose for Gaude Gloriosa. These scraps preserve part of the contratenor voice part and show the piece in a much earlier state and with an English text by Henry VIII's wife Catherine Parr, dating from the 1540s, and intended to inspire the king in his battles with the Scots and the French. So Gaude Gloriosa is actually a striking example of Tallis judiciously repurposing and revising an earlier work to fit a new context. This also helps to explain why this symphonically proportioned piece is a hybrid between the older pre-Reformation style and the newer compositional trends of the 1550s. Many of the stylistic hallmarks of the old votive antiphon can be found in Gaude Gloriosa. The piece is divided into two halves, with wide vocal ranges in all parts and a soaring treble at the top of the texture. And Tallis begins each section with a passage for solo voices, so that the scoring varies from just 3 up to the full 6-part texture. He uses this technique to great effect at the opening, where the first tutti entry follows 2 sections for reduced forces, with all the singers coming in on the word omnia, allowing for a wonderful bit of word painting. On the flip side, the overall scoring for 6 voices weighted in favour of the lower parts, and the dense textures of the full sections, where little respite or time off is given in any of the voice parts, are far more reminiscent of Tallis's mid-century contemporaries than the music of any pre-Reformation composer. Also quite modern is the extraordinary section for twin treble and alto voices, which begins the second half of the piece. These moments where a given voice part splits in 2 are referred to in contemporary sources as gemels, so quite literally twins. Tallis indulges in another bit of wonderfully dramatic word painting when setting the portion of the text about the eternal punishment of hell and the devil's power, with all 4 of the solo voices, including twin bass parts, descending to their lowest note one after another for the word diabolica. And the piece ends with a rhapsodic extended Amen, with this single word spanning nearly 30 bars of music. This serves as an appropriately grand conclusion to this monumental work, and perhaps also provides an insight as to why William Byrd was moved to set the words "Tallis is dead and music dies" on the passing of his friend and teacher in 1585.